first heard it call my name at 2:17 in the morning. That is the part I remember with disgusting clarity. Not midnight. Not 3. 2:17. I know because I had just checked my phone, hoping the time would be closer to dawn. The screen burned my eyes when I tapped it awake inside the tent. No signal. 41% battery. 2:17 a.m. I remember staring at those numbers while rain ticked softly against the fly, and the mountains breathed around me in the dark. Then, from somewhere beyond the trees, my brother called my name. Evan. I stopped breathing. My brother Tyler was not supposed to be there. He was 300 miles away in Richmond, working night shift at a hospital warehouse. I had spoken to him before driving into western North Carolina, and he had made fun of me for wanting to spend a weekend alone in the Appalachian backcountry. "You're going to get eaten by some hill goblin," he'd said. I laughed. I told him I needed quiet. That was true. The quiet was supposed to help. My father had died 6 months earlier, and since then, every room I entered felt too loud. People tried to comfort me with words that all seemed to come from the same invisible pamphlet. "Sorry for your loss. He was a good man. At least he didn't suffer long. If you need anything, call me." Nobody ever means that last one, not fully. People mean, call me if your grief is clean and scheduled and does not interrupt dinner. So I stopped calling. I stopped answering. I stopped sitting in rooms where everyone watched me like I might break something. I packed my old tent, borrowed a water filter, bought more food than I needed, and drove west until the roads narrowed and the mountains began folding over each other like dark blankets. I picked a trail I had never hiked before, not famous enough to be crowded, not remote enough to feel suicidal. A 3-day loop through old logging country, ridge trail, creek valley, abandoned cabin spur, then back to the parking area. The online comments called it quiet, underrated, and a little confusing near the old homestead. Quiet sounded good. Confusing sounded manageable. I started hiking late because I stopped twice for coffee, and once because I sat in the parking lot for almost 40 minutes, unable to make myself get out of the car. The first few miles were normal. Brown leaves, wet roots, rhododendron tunnels, white fungus on dead logs, crows calling somewhere high above. The mountains in late autumn had that stripped, skeletal look that makes every ridge visible through the trees, but somehow harder to judge. By the time I reached the first creek crossing, the sky had turned the color of dirty wool. I should have stopped there. Instead, I pushed on, because grief had taught me to mistake punishment for progress. The campsite was not official. It was just a flat place beside the trail where other hikers had clearly camped before. A circle of stones, blackened dirt, 2 logs arranged like benches, enough space for 1 tent. A creek nearby, not visible through the laurel but audible, moving fast over rocks. I set up before full dark, ate cold tortillas and tuna because I was too tired to cook, hung my food bag badly, and crawled into my tent while the first rain began. For a while, it worked. The isolation, the rain, the exhaustion. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to water hit nylon and leaves, and for the first time in months, my mind loosened its grip on my father's hospital bed. No machines, no smell of antiseptic, no memory of his hand in mine, so light by the end that it felt like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in warm paper. Just rain. Then I woke at 2:17, and Tyler called my name from the woods. "Evan." I did not answer. The first rule of hearing a voice in the woods at night is that you tell yourself it was not a voice. An owl, a fox, a branch, a dream folding itself into waking. The human brain is a pattern-making machine, and grief makes it worse. I had heard my father's cough in grocery stores. I had heard my mother say my name from empty rooms. Once, 2 weeks after the funeral, I turned around in a gas station because a man cleared his throat the exact way my father used to before asking for a receipt. So when I heard Tyler outside my tent, I did what rational people do. I refused to believe it. The rain softened. The creek kept moving. My own breath sounded too loud. Then the voice came again. Closer. "Evan, you awake?" Same voice. Same cadence. Even that tiny upward lift at the end, like Tyler was already irritated because he knew I was pretending not to hear him. I felt cold spread across my chest. I reached for my phone. Still no signal. 2:18. I opened my messages anyway, as if some impossible new text might explain everything. Nothing. The voice moved slightly to the left. "Come on, man. It's freezing." That sentence almost broke me because it sounded annoyed, not ghostly, not theatrical, not like a demon trying to lure me into the trees. It sounded exactly like my brother standing outside in bad weather, pissed off that I was making him wait. I unzipped my sleeping bag halfway, then stopped. Something was wrong. Not the obvious thing. The obvious thing was impossible, and the mind can sometimes step around impossibility if the voice is familiar enough. The wrongness was smaller. Tyler would have called me Dev, not Evan. He always did. Everyone else used Evan. My mother, my father, teachers, bosses. But Tyler had called me Eve since we were children because he said the second syllable was wasted effort. Outside, the voice said, "Evan, open up." I slowly zipped the sleeping bag closed again. The rain stopped. Not faded, stopped, all at once. The sudden silence made the tent feel enormous and thin. I could hear something standing just beyond the rainfly. Not breathing, not stepping, only present. "I'll wait in the dark, Tyler," I said before I could stop myself. My own voice came out dry and small. The thing outside was silent for perhaps 5 seconds. Then it laughed. It was Tyler's laugh, almost. The sound had the right rhythm, the right burst of air at the beginning, but it ran too long at the end, like a recording stretched half a second beyond human comfort. "Yeah," it said. "It's me." My hands went numb. "Why are you here?" A pause. The pause was too long. Then, car broke down. That made no sense. There was no road near the campsite, no access trail, no way Tyler could have known where I was, even if he had somehow driven into the mountains. Where? Up there. Up where? Another pause. By the road. The voice had moved again. Now it was behind the tent. I turned my head slowly, following it through the nylon wall. The darkness beyond the fabric seemed thicker there. I whispered, "What road?" It answered immediately this time, too quickly, as if it had been waiting for a question it could use. "The one you came on." I did not speak again. The tent wall behind me pressed inward, not dramatically, just a small dimple near shoulder height, as if someone had touched the rainfly with one finger. Then another dimple appeared beside it. Then another, a hand, 5 points pressing gently against the tent. The fingers were too long. I stared at them while every part of me tried to convince every other part not to move. The hand slid down the outside of the tent, slowly. The nylon made a soft whispering sound under the pressure. "Bev," the voice said. My heart stopped. It had corrected itself. It had heard the mistake. "Open the tent." I grabbed my knife from the side pocket of my pack and held it against my chest. The hand withdrew. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then Tyler's voice began circling the tent. "Not walking." That is important. If it had been walking, I would have heard leaves, twigs, mud. I would have heard weight shifting. Whatever was outside moved around me without making ground noise, but the voice traveled with it. "F, a little farther right. F, behind me. F, near the front vestibule. F, come on." Each time it sounded more like him, less stretched, less raw, as if practicing. Then it started using other voices. My mother for Evan, she sounded frightened. That was crueler. "Baby, unzip this." My mother had not called me baby since I was 12, but the sound of her voice still went through me like a wire. She was alive, asleep at home, probably with the television glowing blue across her living room because she had not slept right since my father died. Outside the tent, she said, "I can't see out here." I covered my ears. It did not help. The voice came through my hands. Then my father spoke. "Son." I shut my eyes so hard that bright shapes bloomed behind them. "No, son, help me up." I began shaking. That was exactly what he said the last time he fell in the bathroom. 3 weeks before he died, I had found him on the tile, thin knees drawn up, one hand gripping the sink pipe. His dignity was already leaving him by then, piece by piece, and he hated needing help more than he hated the cancer. "Son," the thing said outside my tent. "Help me up." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. The voice changed again. Not my father now. Me, my own voice, coming from just beyond the fabric. "Don't listen to it." I opened my eyes. "Evan," my voice whispered. "I'm outside. It's in there with you." Every muscle in my body locked. The tent seemed suddenly smaller. The space behind me, the dark corners near my pack, the foot of the sleeping bag. I swept the knife outward and scrambled backward into the wall. Nothing was inside. The version of me outside whispered urgently, "It got in while you were asleep. You need to come out right now." I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the trap was so obvious and still so effective. A mimic. The word entered my mind from old stories I had read at 2 in the morning. Appalachian legends, internet posts, ranger warnings, people saying if you hear your name in the woods, no you didn't. People joked about it, made videos, told stories with titles like Never Answer a Voice in the Forest. It was all entertaining until the voice outside your tent knew how your dead father sounded when he asked for help. My phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I dropped the knife. The screen lit up. No signal. Incoming call. Tyler. I stared at the name. The phone vibrated against the sleeping pad. The thing outside went silent. I answered with my thumb before I could think. Tyler. A half-second of static. Then my brother's real voice, thin and distorted, said, Ev. Relief hit me so hard I nearly sobbed. Tyler, listen to me. Something is outside my tent. What? There's something outside. It's using your voice. A pause. Then Tyler said, Ev, I'm outside. The line crackled. I found your tent. Don't open it. There's something standing behind me. The call cut. The screen went black. Outside, my brother's voice began laughing. Not almost right now. Perfect. It laughed exactly like Tyler. Then it said that was good. I picked up the knife again. The first zipper tooth moved. Zzzz. Just 1 inch. I lunged forward and grabbed the zipper tab from the inside, gripping it so hard the metal bit into my palm. The pull on the other side stopped. For a moment, the only sound was my breathing. Then something outside gripped the zipper from the other side and pulled gently. Not hard, gently, like someone testing a locked bathroom door. Ev, Tyler said softly, you can't stay in there all night. I held the zipper shut with one hand and the knife with the other. My legs cramped, my back ached. Cold sweat slid down my ribs. How do you know my name? I whispered. The thing outside went quiet. Then it said, in my father's voice, you brought it. That was worse than any answer, because it sounded true. I thought of the grief I had carried into the mountains like a second pack. Every memory, every voice, every regret. Maybe that was what things like this used. Not names floating in the air, not random sounds, open wounds. The thing outside pressed its face against the tent. I did not see features, only a shape pushing into the nylon. Forehead, nose, mouth, too high, too narrow. The fabric stretched around it. It inhaled, deeply, smelling me. Then it spoke in a voice I did not know. A little girl. Found you. I screamed then. I am not ashamed of that. The face withdrew. Something slammed into the side of the tent so hard one of the poles snapped. The roof sagged. Rainwater dumped across the floor. I slashed blindly with the knife and felt it catch fabric, not flesh. The tent collapsed halfway over me. I kicked, crawled, tangled myself in the sleeping bag, and tore through the vestibule flap into the open night. The forest was black. My headlamp was somewhere inside the collapsed tent. My phone too. I still had the knife, one boot on, one boot off, and a terror so complete that it felt almost clean. I ran. Not along the trail. I could not see the trail. I ran toward the sound of the creek because at least the creek was real. Branches tore at my face. Rocks cut my bare foot. My shoulders slammed into a tree hard enough to numb my arm. Behind me, the thing moved through the woods. This time I heard it. Not footsteps. Voices. Dozens of them, passing from tree to tree. Tyler calling my name, my mother crying, my father coughing, my own voice screaming for help, a woman laughing, a child singing. Then silence. I reached the creek and fell into it. The water was freezing and fast, no deeper than my knees, but strong enough to knock me sideways. I crawled to the opposite bank, dragging myself over slick rocks and roots. My bare foot struck something sharp underwater, and pain flashed white up my leg. I kept moving. On the far side, I found the trail, or trail. In the dark, every narrow opening between trees looks like a trail if you need one badly enough. I followed it uphill. The rain began again, heavy now, soaking through my shirt, washing blood from my face into my mouth. I held the knife low, uselessly. My lungs burned. My injured foot slipped inside the wet leaves. After 10 minutes, maybe 20, I saw light. A cabin, small, old, one window glowing yellow. I stopped so fast I almost fell. No cabin had been on the map. I stood among the trees, shaking, staring at that impossible warm square of light, while rain ran into my eyes. The front door opened. A man stepped onto the porch. He held a lantern. Evan, he called. I nearly answered. The voice was not Tyler's, not my mother's, not my father's. It was a ranger's voice, calm and adult and trained for emergencies. Evan hailed. We got a call about a missing hiker, you heard? I gripped the knife tighter. The man lifted the lantern higher, illuminating his face. He wore a green ranger jacket, short gray beard, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. His expression looked concerned but controlled, the face of someone who had dealt with panicked people before. "Easy," he said. "You're bleeding pretty bad." "How do you know my name?" "Your brother called it in." That should have reassured me. Instead, I felt the forest behind me listening. "My brother doesn't know where I am." The ranger frowned. "He had your route, said you sent him the map before you lost service." I had forgotten. Before leaving the parking lot, I texted Tyler a screenshot of the loop and wrote, "If I get murdered by hill goblins, tell them I died brave." He had replied with a skull emoji. The ranger took one step down from the porch. "Come inside, you're hypothermic." I looked behind him. The cabin interior seemed normal. Wooden walls, radio on a table, first aid kit, a small stove, no movement. But I had already learned the worst thing about terror. Once something impossible happens, reality never fully earns your trust back. "What's my brother's nickname for me?" I asked. The ranger blinked. What does Tyler call me?" "Son, I don't know." Wrong answer. Or maybe a reasonable answer. My mind split itself into two screaming halves. A real ranger would not know that. Of course he would not know that. But the mimic knew. The mimic had learned. Maybe it would say, "Eve now." Maybe not saying it was proof of humanity. The ranger slowly lowered one hand toward his radio. "I need you to put the knife down." Behind me from deep in the woods, Tyler shouted, "Don't." The ranger's head snapped toward the sound. His face changed. Not into a monster, into fear. Real fear. He heard it too. That saved me. The ranger grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the cabin with sudden force. Inside. Now. We ran. Something crashed through the brush behind us, large enough to shake water from leaves. The ranger shoved me through the doorway and slammed it shut. He threw a bolt, then another, then dragged a wooden bar down across the frame. The cabin had no electricity. The lantern on the table was battery-powered. A radio hissed beside it. There were maps pinned to one wall and a shotgun locked in a rack near the stove. The ranger turned off the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. "Do not stand in front of the window," he whispered. I crouched against the wall, shaking so badly my teeth clicked. Outside, Tyler's voice called from the porch. "Open up. It's right behind me." The ranger closed his eyes. "Damn it," he whispered. I stared at him. "You know what it is." He did not answer. The voice outside pounded on the door. "Please open the door." It sounded so real, so perfectly afraid. The ranger leaned close to my ear. "It can copy distress better than anything else," he whispered. "Do not give it new words." "What is it?" "Hungry." "That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters right now." The thing outside stopped pounding. For a few seconds, rain filled the silence. Then it spoke in the ranger's voice. From inside the cabin, directly behind me. "You brought it here." I spun, slashing with the knife. Nothing. The real ranger grabbed my wrist before I cut him. "Don't," he hissed. The voice behind me laughed. Then it moved to the ceiling. Then under the floor. Then inside the stove. Every time it spoke, it used the ranger's voice more cleanly. "Open the door. Put the knife down. You're bleeding pretty bad. Come inside." It was learning him. The ranger moved to the shotgun cabinet. His hands were steady, but his breathing was not. He unlocked the rack and removed the gun, then handed me a small flashlight. "If I tell you to run, you run through the back door and keep downhill until you hit the gravel road. There's a road. 2 miles. Why didn't you call for help?" He glanced at the radio. The speaker hissed. Then my mother's voice came through it. "Evan." The ranger flinched. My whole body went cold. The radio was off. My mother said, "Why won't you answer me?" The ranger ripped the battery pack from the radio. Her voice continued from the empty speaker. "I lost your father. Don't make me lose your too." I covered my face. The ranger whispered, "It's using yours more than mine." "Why?" "You're open." The words hit harder than I expected. The front window darkened. Something stood outside. I could see only its outline against the rain-gray night. Tall, too thin. Shoulders high. Head bent forward under the porch roof. It lifted one hand and placed it against the glass. The hand looked human until the fingers unfolded. Too many joints. Too much length. The ranger raised the shotgun. The thing pressed its face to the window. It was my father. Not as he had looked in the hospital. As he had looked when I was young. Strong. Broad, beard trimmed short, eyes tired but kind. My father smiled sadly through the glass. The Ranger said, "Don't look at it. Too late." My father mouthed something. I heard it inside my head. "I'm proud of you." That was the thing I had wanted most. Not money, not comfort, not even another day with him. Just that sentence in his voice, clear and certain, before the cancer took his throat, and then everything else. The knife slipped from my hand. The Ranger struck me across the face. Hard. Pain snapped the spell. The thing at the window opened my father's mouth much too wide and screamed without sound. The Ranger fired. The window exploded outward. The shape vanished from the porch. The sound came half a second later from the roof. Heavy movement crossing overhead. The Ranger grabbed my collar and dragged me toward the back door. Run. Something slammed down the chimney. The stove burst open. Ash and black rainwater exploded across the floor. A long arm unfolded from the stove, elbow bending the wrong way, fingers scraping at the boards. The Ranger fired again, point blank. The thing shrieked in every voice it had stolen. Tyler, my mother, my father, me, the little girl, the Ranger, all at once. Then the back door was open and we were outside. We ran downhill through rain and trees, the Ranger ahead now, moving with terrifying speed for an older man. I limped after him, half falling, one foot slick with blood. Behind us, the cabin lights flashed on, though there had been no electricity. Every window glowed. In each one stood someone I loved. Tyler, Mom, Dad, Tyler, Mom, Dad, all watching us descend. The Ranger shouted, "Don't turn around." I'd already seen enough. The trail became a drainage cut, then a washed-out logging road. Gravel appeared under my feet so suddenly I almost collapsed. The Ranger caught me and shoved me toward a white pickup parked half hidden beneath branches. He threw me into the passenger seat, jumped behind the wheel, and started the engine. The thing screamed from the tree line. Not in rage. In perfect imitation of a police siren. The Ranger drove without headlights for almost 30 seconds, then switched them on when the road widened. My hands shook in my lap. Blood from my face spotted my pants. "Is it following?" I whispered. The Ranger did not answer. In the side mirror between the trees behind us, my father ran on all fours, only for a second. Then darkness took him. We reached the main road just before dawn. At the Ranger station, they wrapped me in a blanket, cleaned my foot, and called an ambulance. I refused at first, then accepted when I realized I could no longer feel two toes. Nobody laughed when I told the story. That was almost worse. They did not confirm it either. They used words like exposure, panic, possible animal encounter, auditory hallucination, hypothermia. The official report said I became disoriented after my campsite collapsed in a storm and was recovered by a park employee from an old service cabin. The Ranger who saved me was named Harrow. At least that is what he told me. When I asked about him later, the woman at the desk went very still. There had been a Ranger Harrow in that district. He retired in 2009, died in 2016, heart attack, at home. I laughed when she told me because my brain had no other response left. Then she showed me his photograph on the station wall. Same gray beard, same eyes, same face. The plaque beneath it read, Daniel Harrow 1958 to 2016. He knew these mountains better than anyone. I should say that was the last strange thing. It was not. When Tyler arrived that afternoon, he hugged me so hard my ribs hurt. He was real, warm, alive, angry, crying, calling me Eve every other sentence. On the drive home, I slept in the passenger seat. I dreamed of my tent, not collapsed, standing perfectly in the rain. Something sat inside, wearing my shape, holding my phone. It was listening to Tyler's old voicemail messages, practicing. When I woke, my phone had 1 bar of service. A new voicemail waited, unknown number. Tyler was driving. I did not tell him. I played it with the volume low against my ear. For 11 seconds, there was only rain. Then my own voice whispered, Ev. It laughed softly, perfectly. Got it right this time.